what a work of literature means and how it means it. So we have to break it into its pieces. We have to take it apart. So your project was, I gave you 6 stories. You were supposed to read 2 and analyze them. And at this point in our revision, we just pick one of those 2 stories and we analyze it further. How is a literary analysis an argument, right? Well, you're arguing, there's your interpretation of the text. There's not just one way to look at it. So you could discuss attributes that you think are important and make an arguable point about them. There's not a right answer when we do literary analysis. It's awesome that way. There are more than one way that you could look at a story, more than one literary element you could look at it through. So remember that you actually know more than you think you know about how to do this, even if you haven't done it before. So you're going to use evidence to back up whatever you say. All right, so you've got your basic elements, and the whole first marking period was about that. So there's lessons on that in the first marking period if you need it, and structure of the story and the different pieces, rhetorical elements, meaning. You want to be able to identify your theme. That's the most important thing. If you've got a theme, then you understand the story. A theme is like the message, right? Like everything we read it because they're trying to tell us something, trying to give us a message. So your job when you write a literary analysis is to identify the theme, and then how do the story elements contribute to that theme? How do the different pieces of the story show us something? And the more you know, the more you know. So if you know what symbols and allusions and other devices are, you'll be able to do a fancier job of this. If you don't, you'll have to stick with the basic elements. So there's 2 lessons in the narrative thing about this if you need more information, but the basic 5, like you can't write a story without these, is theme. That's like the message, the main idea that the author's trying to give you. Plot, that's like what happens in the story. First this happened, then that happened, then this happened, then the other thing happened. Characters are the people, or sometimes they're animals, that the author creates that are doing stuff. The setting is where and when that stuff happens. And the point of view is who's telling the story, who's getting to tell, like if you're reading Harry Potter, you get to see Harry Potter's view of the world. You don't get to see Voldemort's view of the world. It's not part of the story. You get to see Harry Potter. He's the hero. So all of these elements are the basic things that stories are made of. And theme is the most important. If you identify the theme, the rest of the paper makes it easy to write, right? So what does the author want us to understand about this? Let's take a little quiz, see how you do. So in stories, the sequence of events, right? The plot is always the same. There's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is usually where we find out what the conflict or the problem is. The middle is usually where we get the climax or the crisis is reached. And the end is where we resolve all the problems. If you've watched any movie, you've seen this. If you like romantic comedies like I do, it's my favorite genre, or you have a mother who you're willing to watch them with, the beginning of the romantic comedy is always where you just find out who are these people and why don't they like each other, because they instantly don't like each other when they meet. That's what romance is about. And then in the middle, you figure out how they actually get together and start to like each other, but then there are problems, and then there are things that are getting in the way, and then somebody has a big reveal, and somebody goes to the airport or whatever and gives their big speech about how I'm going to love you forever, and that's the climax. And then the end is where they figure out how to live happily ever after, right? Same thing is true with an action movie. Beginning is always the same. You're always figuring out who are these people, and then where does the superpower come from, and then the middle is the chase scenes and the fights with the bad guys, and the end is like everything's fine. And that always looks the same, right? It'll have this exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. If you understand that this is the pattern of every single story, when you watch a movie or you see a story, you start to see it, and then you start to be able to analyze how it works. Sometimes authors do funny, interesting things and do flashbacks and put things out of order, and that can be interesting. All right, we're gonna skip this because we don't have time. One way to know what's going to happen in a story is to identify the conflict. So is it a person versus person, or they're two different people that are like fighting with each other? Then you know that the climax is going to be them fighting with each other. They're going to have to face each other. We just watched The Lion King last week. And you know that Simba's going to have to fight Scar. It's like just what's going to have to happen, you know, because their conflict is Simba versus Scar, person versus person. But there's also person versus society conflict, right? And so that's when a person is fighting against the evil, like the Matrix, or the Hunger Games or something like that. And there's person versus nature conflict. That's like Hatchet when he's out in the woods all by himself, or anytime when somebody's on the island by themselves. There's person versus fate or supernatural, which is like, you know, they're dealing with ghosts or fate of their, you know, Harry Potter has to face Voldemort because it's his fate. Or person versus self. And, you know, even The Lion King had some of that, because Simba doesn't go back to face Scar, this conflict, because he's dealing with the fact that he believes what Scar told him. So he's like all wounded inside and has to get over himself and stop singing Hakuna Matata and go face his demons. So all stories have conflict. If you can figure out what kind, that's a way that you can analyze and talk about your story. All stories also have characters, and that's another place that you can talk about your story. You could use words, and you know, you can come back to this and look at it anytime. You could talk about how your character is round and dynamic. Almost all main characters are. That means they have like a full personality. They're not just a boring stereotype, and that they're growing and learning stuff. So the other characters usually stay static or flat, and this could be more advanced. I'm going over it quickly, but you can talk about characters as one of your elements. And when we talk about characters, we think about like how they act, how they look, how they dress, what they say, and how others feel about them. All those things are ways to analyze them. So if you were reading, you know, like we read The Poet X, and she has a particular way she talks and a particular way that you can tell her family feels about her, even in that short passage, and you could write about her. We're going to skip that. I'm going to skip that. All right. Setting is the other one that you can analyze. It's a time period, but it's also like, it could be a geographical location, or it could be historical and cultural context. Or it could be instrumental, you know, it could be part of the mood, right? So that sometimes it's like it takes place on a dark and stormy night. That's to give you that context and make it a scary story. And it could be a symbol of the emotional state of the characters. So a lot of times when it's raining, it's because the characters are sad or depressed, or overcast and gray, right? It's the characters are sad and depressed. Or if it's sunny and beautiful, the characters are happy. So those pieces can also be part of the setting. And it can impact the characters' motivations and opinions. And the last of the elements, and I'm going quickly, is the point of view. A lot of stories, especially young adult stories, are written in first person, where the narrator is a character and they're saying I, me, I, and they're revealing their own thoughts and feelings, but not anybody else's. So a lot of what you read is going to be in first person, and most of the story choices I gave you, I think, are in first person. But occasionally you'll also see third person, which is when the author writes he or she, and there are three different kinds. The objective third person observer tries to be like a reporter and not in the story, and I'm not in the story, and I'm just telling you what happened. The limited character is a narrator that's outside the story, but they can see into the mind of one of the characters. So they tell it like he, she, but they can see what the person is thinking. And omniscient is when the narrator knows what all the characters are thinking, like Santa Claus, right? I know what you're thinking. So if you want to, and you notice that the passage is written in one of these ways, you name it, and that's part of your analysis, is naming it. All right, let's do another quiz. Let's see if you understand any literary elements. Choose the two words that go best with setting. So let's take a look. We did really well. Where and when are definitely the answer choices that go best with setting, and conflict is where we find the drama. The people in stories are called characters. This one is the only one people missed. The only place that can be the setting of a fairy tale is a faraway castle. The king and queen are the characters. People change as they get older is a theme, and a wicked witch puts a curse on a princess is the plot, right? So a setting is a place or a time. So a faraway castle is where we often set fairy tales. And then all action that goes on in the story makes up the plot. Okay, so now those are the basic elements. You'll find them in every single kind of story that there is. And so there's a couple other kinds of things that you might find in some stories that are like rhetorical elements and other fancier things. So foreshadowing is one. You might see that if the author gives hints or clues that suggest what's going to happen later, and it like builds suspense. If you notice that, you can name it. Because again, your writing is all about like noticing the pieces of the story to share that this is how the author is doing this on purpose. Tone is like the author's attitude. It's either stated or implied, and it's through their word choice. So if you get a narrator that's like full of sarcasm or something, they've got a sarcastic tone, you want to mention that. Mood is another one. It's the climate or the feeling of the work of literature. So I don't know if you ever read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. That one is super dark. It's like the whole time you feel like, what are they doing? And then all of a sudden you realize they're throwing stones at somebody to kill them. It's like, ew, the mood is very ominous. And then another thing that we see a lot, it's not in every story, but we see it, is symbolism, where one thing represents something else. So like the American flag equals freedom, or the dove equals peace. Or like I used to show this movie Fresh. It's a great movie about a kid who's a drug dealer, and he's trying to get out of the game. And he like actually sets up these other drug dealers to get each other so that he can get out. And he does it with the theme of chess. So he keeps playing chess the whole time, and you keep watching him play chess and then thinking about chess, and you realize that that's what he's doing in the bigger story. So it's a symbol, right? The chessboard is a symbol of his mind. It's such a good movie. Check out Fresh if you ever get a chance. And the last one, I love irony, but irony is hard to identify. And if you haven't practiced at it, it might be too hard to notice it. But it's the contrast between what's expected and what actually happens. And so verbal irony is sarcasm, right? It's when I say, oh, that's great. And you know that I mean that sucks. Irony of a situation is like when something happens that's the opposite of what you expect, or it's so weird, it just doesn't make sense. Like the picture of a guy riding an escalator to go to the gym just felt like really wrong. Like you just walk up some stairs, you're going to the gym. Or dramatic irony is like that happens a lot in sitcoms where the audience or the reader knows something that the characters don't know, and that gives you that feeling. So a lot of times you'll see that in movies and TV shows. You might also see some of the figurative language, the stuff we've been studying with words on Thursdays, of like similes and metaphors and alliteration and personification. If you notice any of that stuff, mention it. That's definitely stuff you can talk about. So, your work is you're going to write just 2 paragraphs, that's it. And you're going to write about how that story is amazing. I'm going to skip all this, skip all this, skip all this, because I'm going to go and show you this piece. Okay, so this is the project, the full project. And here are some links to video lessons if you need them. And then here are the stories, right? And this is in your email, the email I sent today with an invite to this very thing. It says choose any 2 stories. At this point, choose 1 because you're just going to the writing part. They're all hyperlinked, so you'll be able to see the story here. And next to them all is any story that you choose. I'll pull this one up. I love this story, With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. I think you might like this, Bianca. It's a really good story. But you'll notice that I put this thing here that has all the literary elements on it right there on the story. So you can help you analyze. So as you read, you look for, do you see any of these things? And if you do, you highlight and annotate so you can keep track of it for your writing. Notice that the stories are not that long. This is one of the longer ones and it's 7 pages, but it's so good, you'll like it. I couldn't put that book down, or the whole book, but choose any one of the 4 stories, and 6 stories, and then you'll come down here and there's the task, right? This is exactly the words that are on the Regents exam. It says you want to closely read the text provided and write a well-developed text-based response of 2 paragraphs. In your response, identify a central idea. Central idea is just another word for theme. And analyze how the author's use of one writing strategy, right, which notice it's literary element, technique, or rhetorical device, those things we just went over, develops its central idea. Cite strong and thorough evidence of your text to support your analysis. And now I'm giving you a blank, right? So as you worked through this, and again, in order to work on it, you'll have to make a copy, right? And when you make a copy, you can just call it, you know, your name. And that way it'll be easy to find it and easy to give you credit for it. But once you've got that, then you can actually write into this template and just erase things. So genre, do you guys know what genre is? Anyone?
Yeah.
What's a genre?
It's like basically like a summary of the story, I guess.
It's the kind of
like in the back of the book or whatever.
It's the kind of story. So for this case, these are these are in the excerpt from the novel, and you can get rid of text. So right, you can use, this is a Google Doc. Don't be afraid to erase things. So see how it says title of text? So at that point, then you just take that and cut it and go, oh, I'm going to use this one. So it's with the fire on high. And you can use Command C and Command V to cut and paste things, right? Because then you can play with the font and make it fit. And oh, who's it by? Oh, I don't even have to remember, right? I can go over here and just Command C and go back over here and Command V, and then I can make it smaller so it fits, right? Make it how it works for you, and then use this template. So the author describes the essential idea that what is this story about? You're come up with it. What is the author trying to tell us, do you think, after you finish reading it? And as long as what you're saying is logical and clear, you'll write. There's going to be more than one thing that people say the story is about, and they're all right. Because what you're going to do is then prove it with, on page whatever of this, she stated this, and you put a quote in. And then explain how the quote is significant to the central idea, right? This supports the central idea because thus it's clear that the author illuminates his idea that. So you can keep this stuff in and use this language. It's all transition language. It's there for you. If you don't find it helpful, don't use it. If you'd rather just look at this and do the best you can, that's fine. But there's a full template of tell the quote and explain the quote and then connect it back. And so if you follow the template, it should be everything you need. The rubric is here. It's the New York State Regents exam rubric. And so that will go into, each of you got a portfolio. Looks like this. And this is just the place where you put everything together. Okay, so before you go, oh my God, how am I going to do this all? You have 7 days. Do the first piece today, which is maybe just today, fill in the make a copy of it and fill in your name and a quote and put a picture and about you and what are your goals. And then if you have a draft of your first personal narrative already and it's got notes on it, screenshot it. Do we know how to screenshot? I'm going to do this for the first person that says something. I'm going to make this for. Who needs their portfolio made for them?
Me.
Bianca. So see what I'm doing? You guys are all gonna do the same thing. You're gonna put your name in and make a copy so that you've got your portfolio, right? Then we're gonna look for your writing. Here is Bianca's narrative. So now I've got Bianca's portfolio and her narrative. So we can go here, we can change your name. You gotta capitalize it because you are very important. You'll pick whatever quote you want. You'll put a photograph, you'll put about you, you'll make your own goals. Here's how we do the screenshotting, okay? So you pull open the document I've given you and you go, oh wait, I already got rid of all the things, all the notes. So we go back to version history. Do we see if we can find the one where I wrote some things on it? Oh, see, there's me having given some stuff. So we go back to an older version. Let's see if we get to the oldest version that's just the way it was in the first draft. Restore it. And now we get a screenshot, which is Command-Shift-3. Usually you'll hear a click, like a click. There it is. And then you just take it over here. There you go, you heard the click. And you insert image, upload from the computer. This is harder to do on a phone. So if you're working only on a phone and you need my help, just send me drafts of things and I will put this part together for you. And then you just have to write your narratives. All right, so then you open this, but you're like, I don't want the whole Zoom window on there. So you come over here to crop and you crop it down and you get rid of all the extra stuff on your screen that you don't want to see. And now I've got a copy of the first draft. Okay. But I'm not done yet. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to the version history. And I'm going to come to the most recent one. And restore this version. And then I'll keep working on it, right? And there might be more things. Oh, but I don't want to change that because that was her original language. All right. So, you know, there may still be more things you want to change. One thing I'm going to do is change the heading to be an MLA heading. And then we're going to put the today's date so we see that this has gone through more change. And then, you know, maybe this is the final draft. I might do a little more editing on this for you before we actually have it be final draft, but I'm going to double space it. Now it looks really good. And then again, I go Control-Shift-3 to screenshot. Now I'm going to do a whole nother step because I'm going for the final draft is going to have my screenshot as well. So I insert the image that I just took. Insert the image I just took, upload it from the computer. I always go to recents, so I can find it easier. And then it's going to be this one. Again, I'm going to crop it so I get rid of all the extra stuff in the picture that I don't need. And then I'll make the picture bigger, put it where I want. And now this is the tricky step. This is the hyperlink step. And there are videos on how to do this. So if you're not paying attention, you can watch the video, but I'll show you one more time. So I take the personal narrative and I go up to here where it says share. And I get the link. I copy the link. And then I go back to the portfolio and I go up here where it says insert link. Meanwhile, my photograph is highlighted. So that's where I'm inserting the link. And I apply. And now that way, if I click here on this picture, I'm going to get back to this document. It's going to take me back to that document. And now, Bianca, your job is to come to this slide and decide. If you have not used the writing process before, you would just delete that. right? If you have, then you delete the other ones. And then here you'll just write what is true for you. It was helpful to use a writing process because I've gotten better at what? I'm proud of what? If I had more time, I would, right? Your reflection
Wait,
here.
can you explain what the writing process is again?
Yeah, it's the process of going through multiple drafts, right? So we start
Okay.
with pre-writing, and then we think about what are the other pieces of it. It's writing and then getting some feedback, and then revising, and then getting some more feedback, and then editing, right? So I haven't edited yours yet, which is when I go in for the fine details of the spelling and grammar.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And there's a whole lesson on writing process. There's a good vocabulary lesson on it. If you missed it, it's on the, on iLearn. So you can always go back to iLearn. And the coolest part of this thing is if you miss something, it's all still there. Like there's nothing that's gone. It's all still here. I like the vocabulary one on writing process because it helps me a lot. I don't know why it's being difficult. I'm not going to be able to go there today. I'll have to wait because we're almost done. All right, but this is the idea, Bianca. You're going to just fill in these reflections, right? And then you'll put your literary analysis in here, right? And you'll again reflect on your literary analysis. And then if you don't end up doing the podcast, you just delete these slides because you put the literary analysis in instead. If you decide literary analysis is not for you and you'd rather do a podcast, you do the podcast and you erase the literary analysis slides. Either way is fine. There's a chance to get some credit for the poetry you've done. So there's a couple slides where you could add poems that you've written for Advocate of Words. If you haven't done.
Wait, but I've sent those to you in like text messages. So how do I?
Well, if you don't have them, just ask me. I've kept them.
Yeah, because I sent them all to you in like text messages or like in the actual call.
Yeah, that's fine. Just text me. I've got them all in, I can put them together and send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
Just remind me because I will forget. So just send me an email or a text message that says, can you send me my poems?
All right.
And then the last step, Ernie, this is what I was talking about. You need to do the final reflection. This is where you argue, I should be passing this class. And the assignment is linked right here. And it's just got the standards that I was trying to teach you, right? So like the class works like the state of New York gives us these standards and they say, in order to get a 9th grade English credit, you need to know this. So this is what you're supposed to know. I have tried to teach it to you. You're going to tell me how much you learned and how much you know and what grade you deserve for it. If you'd rather do this like as a poem or a rhyme or a podcast or a different way of putting it out in the world, that's totally fine with me. We can make a YouTube video. I don't need it to be an essay, but I need you to tell me what you've learned, what grade you think you should get, and why. That's what I need. And then if you need it, there's an outline here that I supplied with sentence starters. But this might not all apply to you, right? Like Sarah was in my class before when we used to do independent reading, but Ernie and Bianca, you guys came during remote. I don't do independent reading now because remote learning, it doesn't make sense to sit there on Zoom and watch you read for 20 minutes. So if you're reading on your own because you just like to read, you should definitely say that in your English reflection. If you don't read at all, then you should just not answer that particular question, or maybe not even answer this whole thing, right? And maybe take that entire paragraph out. You got to make this work for you. So if any of this doesn't work for you, leave it out. It's supposed to be helpful, not like getcha. That makes sense? And once you've done that, you'll be absolutely done. And then you just share this back with me to submit it. I've got a page for myself to give you feedback and tell you, how proud I am of you. And this PowerPoint slide demonstrates that you earned an entire English credit, that you did an entire English course worth of work. I'm going to share this with Bianca right now. Can't spell. It's not coming up. So I guess I need your email address from over here. I'll do this without sharing my screen. All right, we got just a couple more minutes. If anybody's got any more questions or Needs anything, I'm here for you.
I need a suggestion.
Talk to me.
Which one do you think would be like more easier, like the marking period one or the podcast?
It really just depends on you. Do you like to read a lot? Are you someone who reads all the time and likes to take stories apart in your brain?